Democratic Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut. So, Senator, we are waiting for the president to speak, but you're the perfect person to level set for us here. I want to start with the news from Matt Gaetz this morning that he's going to offer a motion to vacate the speakership this week. He wants McCarthy removed. You, of course, have not been in the House for a long time, but you do have to work with a chaotic House. How concerned are you that an already kind of wild House could become even more difficult to work with?
Well, listen, this is an ongoing disaster for the American people. Republicans are simply not fit to govern. They're not serious people. And while the House of Representatives, the Republican caucus is going to go through another round of navel gazing, deciding who's going to lead them, people out there are hurting, right? We still have crises that we need to tackle, whether it be the record number of people dying of overdoses, the continued gun violence crisis, and House Republicans are going to spend the next couple weeks arguing amongst themselves as to who should be the next speaker. Well, I'm glad that we are not shutting down the federal government. What a low bar for House Republicans that we celebrate the fact that they can just barely keep the lights on with hours to go before a shutdown occurs. McCarthy, obviously had to reach out and get Democratic votes, as he will have to do 45 days from now. But as you mentioned, the price here is that he gave in to Republican demands to cut Ukraine off. And ultimately, American security is at risk if we don't start funding Ukraine again. And that will be one of the big fights that we have to undertake over the next month and a half. It's not enough to just keep the lights on the federal government. We actually have to live up to our national security obligations. And one of those is making sure that Kyiv doesn't become a Russian city.
I want to get to that, and there's a lot at risk here. I do want to ask you, with that in mind, there's rumors that Speaker McCarthy could bring a funding bill for Ukraine to the floor. He did, at the last moment, decide to work with Democrats to keep the government open. It could be worse, is what I'm saying. Is there incentive to try to save McCarthy as Speaker?
So no matter who is the Speaker of the House, no matter who's in charge of the Republican caucus, the path to a majority in the House runs through Democrats who actually want the federal government to operate and want to help Ukraine, and a handful of more responsible Republicans. So, that's the problem here, is that whether McCarthy's in charge or somebody else, the governing majority in the House are Democrats and a minority of Republicans. I hope that McCarthy is going to make good on his commitment to bring a Ukraine supplemental funding bill before the House, because what we know is that it has the majority. In the Senate and the House, there's a commanding, easy majority of members who will support continued funding for Ukraine. And my worry is that if we wait until the middle or end of November to have this conversation about whether we're still supporting Ukraine, it may be too late for Ukraine by that point. So my preference is in the next few weeks to bring a supplemental funding bill before the Senate, send that over to the House, and really dare McCarthy to make the decision to abandon Ukraine, even though he has a majority of Republicans and Democrats who will support Ukraine.
Are you worried at all that this potential threat to his speakership could make him put pause on the idea of bringing up this supplemental funding bill that he's been rumored to be considering?
Well, I'm concerned by the fact that when it came down to it, the only demand that McCarthy was willing to give into that was coming from his hard right was the demand to abandon Ukraine. He stood up to them on their immigration demands. He rejected their spending cuts. But the one thing he did give into was this idea that we should end American support for Ukraine, which is, let's just be honest, an invitation for Putin to march his army straight into the rest of Ukraine. It is an abandonment of the entire post-World War II order. So that doesn't bode well for the future of Ukraine. And it just means that those of us who believe that this is a worthwhile fight are going to have to step up our advocacy efforts in the next several weeks and months.
You've been through, unfortunately, a lot of these spending fights before, government shutdowns before. What do you think the next 45 days look like? And is your expectation we're looking at a similar situation in the lead up to Thanksgiving?
I certainly worry that, we're in for, a series of Groundhog Days where we are just having the same fight where McCarthy and these arsonist Republicans bring us up to the precipice of shutdown over and over. And of course, the reality is this is terrible for the American economy. If these hard-right Republicans claim to be fiscal conservatives, it's just not fiscally conservative to shut down the government because we ultimately pay federal employees who are furloughed when they come back to work. But it also costs the American economy billions of dollars when the federal government shuts down. So I think the next year and a half are just going to be a series of ongoing disasters in the House of Representatives. And I think we're going to have to try to do a better job of making the case to them that there's nothing fiscally conservative about threatening shutdown or actually going through a shutdown.
It's all a reminder of the power of voting and how important it is who's in charge. Just to go to politics for a moment, RFK Jr. is out with a new video strongly hinting he could run for a third-party ticket, teasing a, quote, major announcement. We don't know what that means. Do you worry that him running as an independent or third party could hurt President Biden and the Democrats?
I don't. I mean, frankly, what you see is that the portions of the electorate that are interested in Robert Kennedy Jr., tend to be coming from Donald Trump's conspiracy theory base. So if he's running as an independent, I think that may end up hurting Donald Trump or the Republican nominee more than Joe Biden. I also think that the fascination with RFK Jr.'s candidacy was a bit of an elite media fascination. I think ultimately voters know what the stakes are here, and you are going to, I think third-party candidates are not going to be as big a deal come the general election as folks may think. People who support democracy, who support Ukraine, who support competence in government are going to understand that the only way to preserve those things is to vote for Joe Biden.
Senator Chris Murphy, thank you for encouraging people to take a deep breath about that and also worry about Ukraine funding, which is a huge threat. It was a pleasure talking to you today. We've got